Howdy again, it's tubalcain, your YouTube shop teacher, and this is tips number 532, which is part 3 of the rebuild restoration of the Mead bandsander. And since the last episode, the last part, I have finished painting all of the parts and basically ready to start reassembly. However, after I assemble it as far as I can go, I have several parts to make, including a wheel and the table and some little minor parts. So let's get started on that. Well, the paint turned out pretty well, and I painted the inside of the parts even though they weren't painted before. And this is satin black, so it's pretty decent. I probably should have painted that green, but I want to start the video with a rant. And that would be the fact that I decided to paint this cover plate red, although I should replace it because it's so beat up. But look at the bad paint job, simply because of this old can of Krylon red that I'm using here, that it just stopped up. And there's just paint that went all over the place. For instance, look at the spatter here of the red. Even though this was 4 feet away when I painted this, the paint just went every place. Why is it that companies such as this cannot, at the store, supply a little bubble pack with 5 of these tips for 29 cents? Because everybody in the world has run into this problem, unless, of course, you use the entire contents in one sitting. But seldom is that done. But they do not make available extra tips. Shame on you. Shame on you. Alright, this is a short quiz, and I do mean short. Do you notice anything new or different about my workbench? Put it in the comments. I probably should have painted another color than black because the base is already black. And now I cleaned this up real well, and I'm still unsure of what kind of material this is, although I think it's PVC. Polyvinyl chloride. Why do I say that? Because it's quite a hard plastic, and whoever made this or mounted this drilled and tapped. So we have threaded holes in here, 4 of them there and 4 for the motor. So I took it over to the big belt sander, and I sanded and rounded the corners just for the heck of it. I like to do that, but you can see that it's gray in color, and it smelled like PVC when I did that. Now, as I reassemble this, I'm going to go ahead and mount it right on the board as I do this, because otherwise it's topsy-turvy, and you know it's kind of top-heavy and all that. So I think I'll reassemble it almost exactly like I assembled it. Thanks for watching, and be sure and go back and watch the first 2 parts if you have not seen them. I'm treating myself to brand new bolts, but using the old nuts. Before I put the other side plate on here, I have to install a bearing, and I talked a little bit about this in the last video, but this is what the lower bearing looks like, and it's a new departure. There's the number, and that number is stamped right on the end here. And as I told you, that this is either no longer available, but there is one on eBay that appears to be a part for a Jeep, a water pump part. Probably would work, $31. This is still a pretty good bearing. I feel a little bit of roughness there, but it didn't make any noise. So I'm ashamed to say I'm going to use this old one because I want to get on with the project here. But if this was totally spoiled and unusable, and these are hardened on the end here, it looks like that at the factory they probably ground those flats on there because they look pretty irregular, don't they? At the Mead factory. I think they probably bought these OEM parts and modify them and use them. Anyway, if I had to make my own, here's what I would do. I would find two bearings that fit on that shaft. I would be 5/8 ID. I would take a piece of aluminum or steel, bore it, and press one bearing into each end, sealed bearings, and I would have to get the exact right length. That could all be done in about 1 hour. Also notice that there's a little step on each end, and the purpose of the step is to mount it into the hole. So that's how I would do it if it was necessary, but I am going to use the old bearing. Before I mount this wheel, let's talk about it just a little bit. You can always identify zinc or Zamac die castings. They're heavier than aluminum, although aluminum can be die cast as well, but die castings usually have ejector pin marks. You see 4 of them there. So this side of the mold probably was deeper than this side. This side released very easily when they opened the mold, but this had to be forced out by pins. Then they would have had a hole to drill and tap here, and probably just needed to ream this. Now normally, if I can show you the other one here, you're going to see that there is crown on it, and the crown is pretty much automatically produced because the mold has to have taper on it in order for the part to come out. So that would not have to have been machined. That's the upper wheel. But now let's look again at the lower wheel here, and you'll see that there virtually is no crown. Matter of fact, there's a dip in there, isn't there? So this wheel is worn and eroded by the abrasive particles over the years, because that would be right under the table where all of the particles would land, but there probably weren't very many particles coming around on the top side. The question is this wheel any good? Now I'm going to go ahead and mount it, but will it track is the thing, because of the lack of crown. Now if it does not have enough crown, I probably would have to make a new wheel. I don't believe that there's probably enough left here to machine. There wasn't much to start with, because they try to make these die castings as thin as possible so that they won't shrink and so that it's economical to manufacture them that way. But I was surprised, and I just discovered this wear 30 seconds ago. I didn't realize it until just now. See the wear? I do not remember there being a washer here. However, there was a big wad of the strings from the abrasive. And again, there's a flat on there. And I will tighten it down. Time to install the top piece, but what I found here when I took this pin out the other day, if you watch that, you remember I heard a twang as I pulled that. I call these Parker Kalon pins, but I guess it's a hairpin. So I lost that. Well, I didn't even look for it. I don't look for little parts. There is no way I'll find them until 3 years from now when I move something out and sweep. But this piece is badly worn and grooved and everything from the abrasives and from rocking and all that. So I made a new one out of 3/8 stock, and instead of using that kind of pin, I'm using E-clips. Those are 3/8. And I made those little grooves with this little cutoff tool, which I must have ground that years ago, but it worked perfect. It just took moments. Do you understand why in industry they avoid drilling a hole? Because you might make this by drilling a hole, a cross hole, and putting in cotter key, cotter pin, but you're going to break the drill. So imagine if a company had to make 1 million of these. What would be more economical? To drill 1 million, well, 2 million holes, or to do this in the turret lathe from a bar stock, you know, a 16-footer or 12-footer, and just put the groove in, which takes 2 seconds, and then cut it off. 2 seconds here. Whereas you would use countless drill bits. Well, I don't know, maybe that was that a rant or just educational? You really need to buy yourself selections of these various fasteners and fittings and everything. And this is the set for those E-clips. And you see there's a nice selection of the 3/8, so that when I drop one or boing, it goes flying, I've got plenty more. So that's good advice, I think. This is the axle that goes right here for one of the wheels, so I'm going to install that. I don't know why there's 2 holes. Also, I don't know why they used a coarse thread, unless this is not the original pin. The thickness, or I should say thinness here, really calls for a fine thread, but so I'm going to install it here momentarily, but just to show you that I have to make one of these that will fit this hole for the other wheel, but of course I need to make the other wheel first. So I'll wait until I have the dimensions of the other wheel in case it varies just a little bit from this. But that's a fine thread. That's a 1/4 28 fine thread. And again, I don't know why there's 2 holes here. That doesn't make any sense to me. There's a little washer. I'll oil that, although that's an oil light bearing. Goes on like that, and then the little E-clip goes on. And I'll need a pliers to do that. I'm getting sidetracked here, but raise your hand if you remember when I acquired this filing machine, a die filer, and it needs some work. And I had acquired this motor, and this was the motor that was going to go on this filer when I get around to it, but I never did get around to it, but I hope to do it yet this winter. But I'm either going to steal or borrow, beg, borrow, or steal, this 3rd horse 1725 motor off of this machine and put it onto this machine, at least for the duration of this video. Alright, we got a bit of musical chairs here. The pulley that was on this shaft I had to throw away. Remember, it was ruined. So there's a little washer that'll keep the pulley from rubbing here. That came off of that motor that is now toast. And I had this one in stock. It's a 2-incher 5/8, so that'll go on there. A size belt, which is 1/2 inch. And on this motor now, I had this in stock. That's a brand new 2.5 inch. Remember, in the specifications it called for a 3-incher, but there was a 2-incher on the other motor that is now toast. So I am upgrading it to a 2 1/4 simply because I have it in stock. So that'll go on the motor, And this 5/8 will go on there. As simple as this job seems, there's always something you run into. Well, it's not really a big deal, but you notice that some of these pulleys are different lengths. This one is a little bit longer, the one that I'm going to use, so if I put it on like this, the set screw is not going to catch the flat or the shaft at all. So I will have to put it on like this, which I guess is no big deal because that keeps the V-belt a little farther away from the actual sander here where it might rub or hit the bolt or have some interference. So that's where it'll go, at least for now, till I fit it up. You know, when you do a project like this, you keep coming up with little annoyances, and so I went to put the pulley on, but it wouldn't go on because it's all buggered up on the shaft here. And in fact, you can see, so I'll file that off. But you can see here that Bubba tightened the set screw down right there and marred the shaft. Now why he would do that when he had this nice flat over here to do it on, I do not know. And matter of fact, I'm going to find out. I'm sick and tired of it. I'm going to call Bubba because now I have his phone number. Bubba was at the Thresherman's Fair last summer and left the phone number with some piece of equipment that he was going to sell. So I'm going to give him a call, ask him why he did that and why he leaves a trail of destruction wherever he goes. Rim shot, please. Boy, I've been waiting a long time to show off that picture. Well, this motor, of course, has a different frame on it than the other one, and the base for the other one will not fit. They're different NEMA numbers or whatever you call that, so naturally all of these nicely drilled and laid out and threaded holes are not going to work with this motor. So what I will do, and I'm going to do it all off camera, is to, this is the same belt, get that all lined up and positioned and mark the holes, drill them and tap them, because I think that'll tap so nicely. And that'll all be done off camera, and I'll be back in a little bit to show you that. And rather than, this is the wires coming out of the switch, not out of the motor. What I'm going to do there is to put a female plug on there so that this can be plugged in. Matter of fact, I would like to equip all of my machinery that way so I can take the motor off. But yet these are, they're $6, $7 for every one of these now. But I'm pretty sure I have one laying around here. So I'll get that all done and get back to you here in about an hour. Raise your hand. Boy, I've been having you raise your hands a lot lately. How much more you love this kind of receptacle plug as compared to this one with the clamps rather than the little terminals where you have to wrap the wire around and there's no room to work. The problem here, and I know somebody's going to bring this up, is that this is going to collect grit and dust. So a fellow really then, after he gets this all done, needs to tape this all up. But yet I don't like sticky tape around all of this business either, because it also attracts the dust and grit and grime, and oh well, that's the devil. I'll use this one. You know what? I was remiss here. I should have painted this board before I mounted the sander on it. I should have painted it black, but initially I thought that it was black plastic. So I didn't give it a thought until I sanded these corners here and realized that it's that gray PVC. So, well, I'm not going to go back and do that, but it would look a lot better because it is marred up pretty bad. And we got fresh paint here, and the paint on this gray motor is in pretty good condition, so I'm doing nothing with that. So in the next video I'll get started mounting the motor and getting the belt on here and all of that, and I got a lot of other parts to make, and this job is only about half over. So that concludes part 3. Be sure and join me in part 4. This is tubalcain saying so long for now.